The Minnesota Vikings have brought joy and misery to the Vikings fans for many years. At the Skol Purple Podcast, we just want to see the Vikings party with the Lombardi. Join us for analysis, interviews, laughs, and much more. It's the podcast by Vikings fans for Vikings fans. The Skol Purple Podcast starts now. Here's your host, Carson Schubert.
Welcome into the Skol Purple Podcast. It is time for another episode. The Minnesota Vikings have been active in free agency yet again, and it's me, Carson. I returned. I'm back to talk with Peter and Tony. Yeah, give me the fake applause. Gentlemen, it's good to be back. Good to be back talking Vikings. Good to be with you, gentlemen. And for the first time, I think all three of us together. David couldn't join us this week, but we'll probably get all four of us on at some point as well. So, gentlemen, or at least for this episode, I should say, we'll probably have a couple episodes this week, depending maybe on free agency and how that goes, if there's more moves to come, ? But, Peter, how's it going?
It's going good, Good to have you back, kind of picked up the slack for you the last 2 weeks. I mean,
That's right.
Me and Tony's back have been hurting over here with David. I mean, good God.
But you guys need a vacation now, right?
Nice to have you back. I'm excited for, like you said, first time of the three of us. So let's get rocking, man.
Tony, what's going on, man?
Just waiting for more moves. I think that's been the biggest thing. And I know we'll get into it, and so I'll leave it kind of vague for now. But yeah, I mean, I think we had a lot of moves early, which was to be expected. But I feel like things have kind of gotten eerily quiet. So good, but kind of boring, really since the last time we met. But I think that gives us an opportunity to dive in some conspiracy theories and what we think will happen.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, speaking of not conspiracy theories, the Minnesota Vikings did, in fact, factual evidence of signing Dean Lowry, and we'll go ahead and get into that. There's no conspiracy involved there, Peter. I know you live down in Texas where JFK was shot, but there's no conspiracy involved here.
I mean, who is the first of all? That was my first. Who's Dean Lowry? Who?
Well, yeah.
I mean, I looked in, so I did do some digging into this. And Kwesi's going full money ball here. I know we kind of talked about it in text. A guy was pretty. I'm gonna be blatant. He was pretty awful last year. He was flat out terrible last year. But 2 years ago, very productive. Had 5 sacks, more of an interior D lineman. The big money ball play is he had the exact same or within 0.1% quarterback pressure rate as Dalvin Tomlinson did last year. So that's where I think the big money ball is here. We didn't pay any money for him, and we're thinking we're getting the same pressure rate that we got for Dalvin, who got, a fat stack of cash.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. So the deal for Dean Lowry, actually Ben Gessling, as we record this, just tweeted out the contract terms like 7 minutes ago, which is quite interesting. Perfect timing. He signed a deal for 2 years, and there are 3 void years on this contract, which very interesting. So $3 million signing bonus, $4.2 million guaranteed at signing, up to $250,000 per game roster bonus, and $50,000 without bonus both years. Man, I'd love to be on a roster just so I could get that roster bonus, $1.2 million base salary for 2023, fully guaranteed, and then $3.7 million base guaranteed for injury, fully guaranteed third day of league year of 2024, up to $750,000 in incentives. So total cap hits for Lowry, $2.02 million, $4.6 million, and $1.8 million in 25, which is dead money from void years. So it's basically a 2-year deal. is what it comes down to, and it sounds like the Vikings could even get out of it after this year if they wanted to, which we can talk about that too, by the way, which seems like the Vikings are doing lots of that with their free agent signings so far, gentlemen. But I know Peter kind of gave his thoughts on who this is, who, like, as in, who is this? Dean Lowry. Mainly because I remember hearing his name when the Vikings played the Packers, and of course, good old Madden to help out with that as well. But Tony, your thoughts on Dean Lowry coming to the Minnesota Vikings?
I mean, it's a depth move. It's another, as Peter mentioned, it's a numbers move, right? High risk, high reward on a guy you're not spending a lot of money on, even less than what we saw with a guy like Davenport, for instance. But really trying to get a guy in that can add some depth to the line and kind of like we mentioned, hopefully get the same type of production that we saw out of Tomlinson at a much lower cost. So we'll see what happens. I think that this defense is really going to be kind of an enigma until we can get into camp, see what kind of guys we can draft, what Flores and his vision is going to look like once we get the team together. So I'm excited for it. I don't hate the move. Fun fact: he is the brother of bad boy Mike Lowry. So there's that for you. No, I'm just kidding.
All right. Glad that he is not, because that would have been a little awkward. But yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a depth signing. That's kind of my thought when it first happened. Like, it's not like he's making bank-breaking money right now, So it's
Sure.
a depth signing, and I really think the Vikings lacked good depth last year. And I'm not saying Lowry's a guy you want to start multiple games, but I do think, if there's a game or two, that, whoever your starting defensive 3-tech is, your nose tackle is, he could fill in there. He could fill in on the outside if necessary too, I think. Maybe mix and match with Harrison Phillips a little bit. So I think that is nice. So, and I think, you go back to Flores, and one of the things he said when they brought Brian Flores in here was he likes to have people who are versatile. And I think Dean Lowry fits that bill. Not that he's a great versatile player, as we've discussed, but that he is able to fill in either one of those roles. And I think that's huge for the Vikings, at least in terms of what Flores wants to accomplish.
Absolutely.
Anything you want to add on that, Peter?
No, it's. I feel like if we were like a normal team in free agency, this wouldn't even get talked about. But this is, we're down to we'll take anything at this point. So,
well, I will say this much. I think it's what I see an emphasis on right now is pressure, and I think the part of the reason for that is because the back end has been so weak. Pressure can really make a weak secondary look a bit better than what they are, just because it forces the quarterback off script. They're more prone to make mistakes once they have to get, quote unquote, again, off script. So I see that a little bit in some of the moves where we're truly trying to find guys that have a way to, if not maybe sack the quarterback, at least just make them uncomfortable. And I think that might help if we have a relatively young secondary we're probably going to be rolling out next year outside of Murphy. So, I see that as maybe some of the visions start to come together, but we'll see what they do, like I said, in free agency and then into the draft.
Yeah. Well, speaking of more Vikings moves, they have re-signed Peter's favorite guy, Oli Udoh, to come on back. Here's what I'll say about Udoh. I obviously terrible guard, but
the worst guard in the history of the NFL, maybe.
I don't know. Ed Ingram might have competed.
Not even close. They were not even close. Ingram was so much better than him. It wasn't even close. That's how bad Udoh was.
Well, it seems like Udoh is better at tackle, and in the time that he played last year at tackle, he did do okay. I'm not saying it's anything spectacular or like you want him to start kind of the same way with Lowry. You don't want him to start multiple games, but I think he's okay to put in for a couple of games here and there, and obviously is much more comfortable being a tackle. And let's be honest, I don't think he wanted to be put into the situation he was with guard, and probably wasn't comfortable with it, but he's just like, yeah, I'll do it because this is what the team needs. Even though you could have argued maybe that's not what the team needed. Uh, but I don't mind it. I would like to see the Vikings draft some depth on that offensive line a little bit more. But again, you're starting to see some of these guys re-sign. And I think a big reason why that is, Tony and Peter, is because we don't have many draft picks. We have 5 draft picks. We need depth on this team. And that's why the Vikings are dipping their toes back into free agency for a guy like Dean Lowry and re-signing a guy like Oli Udoh and Austin Schlottmann, who we'll talk about in a moment. Tony, let's start with you on this one. What are your thoughts?
I'm right there with you, Carson. I just think if we had a bunch of capital, whether that be in the cap capital, we'll call it that. That's a weird way to say that, or draft capital. If we had cap room, we'll say that. If we had a lot of cap room or draft capital, this is a guy we probably would at least we'd probably wait to kick the tires on again further down until we got closer to camp, unless some other team wanted to pick him up. But I think you hit the nail on the head, Carson. I think what it is with limited resources, it's easier to have a known commodity and know what you have to work with than try to kind of throw caution to the wind with another guy that might be a throwaway from another team, or a young guy that you're going to draft probably pretty deep in the draft. I would assume, unless there's somebody special that they like early, they're probably not going to look at offensive linemen until we get a little deeper in the draft versus early. So, and again, we don't have a lot of picks to begin with. So I just think that this is just purely a known commodity signing, and that's about it.
Yeah. Peter, what are your thoughts?
I mean, obviously, we don't have any draft capital. And all the interior linemen are crap, and you're not going to be taking a high-end tackle anyway in the draft. So it would be a later pick if we're going to add some depth, which there is some depth there, I think, especially on the interior. But, I mean, I have to see the numbers because they said he was going to get a good contract because teams wanted to look at him at starter because of how he looked against Chicago at right tackle. But he's probably going to play. O'Neal, who knows how long O'Neal's out. Darrisaw is one soft contact to his head from being out 3 weeks. So we're probably going to see him start a couple games next year. Most likely, I can see. But better at tackle. Again, they got to do so much overhaul with this stuff. And they know what they have in the building. So if they felt like that's the move to go with when signing him, I'll trust it. But again, I think it's more of a meme at this point, Udoh, than anything in the Viking circles. So they were very ecstatic to see him. It was, him and what's his face who went to Chicago last year, the other terrible offensive lineman. We're getting drawn a blank on his. Dakota Dozier.
Yep.
Dozier, yeah.
Those two were the meme for us for a long time. So
Old
whatever.
Dakota.
It's a whatever move at this point. He'll probably play a game or two for us at right tackle. So, which, God bless. Hope Kirk Cousins survives.
Yeah. I hope so as well. And by the way, I think they also brought back Chris Reed. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I think Chris Reed is back. So he'll be kind of that swing guard again.
I believe that
and
is
maybe
correct.
Third center.
I mean, our depth isn't good, but it's like our starters really aren't that good either. So there's not much of a downgrade between our guards and centers and stuff. But I mean, I hope they fired every offensive lineman scout that we've had because they've been just horrendous at identifying offensive line talent for a long time. We got real lucky with Darrisaw and O'Neal, but other than that, it's been a lot of picks and a lot of misses.
It's funny because as a fan base, and I include myself in this. Obviously, I'm a Vikings fan, but I mean,
you like the Vikings?
I would include myself in this segment of Vikings fans. I should say, where I laid a lot of that on Spielman.
Welcome to my club. Welcome to my club.
it's just, one of us. It's just as you mentioned, Peter, it's like, how many swings and misses are we going to make? And it just, I don't know. He never seemed like he was a very good evaluator of offensive linemen. And I get that sometimes, things
Other
happen,
than
injuries happen.
Harrison and O'Neal, but
Yeah, it just, so, and obviously some of that's your scout team and stuff like that too. It's
that's
not obviously
right.
all on
The rest of it's on
Spielman.
Spielman.
Yeah, and to be clear,
the
I didn't
Bradbury
hate
pick is the
Spielman.
unforgivable one, right? Like Bradbury at 16 or whatever, when we probably could have got him at 50.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
that one chaps me. And if we're gonna go outside of offensive linemen, I'm sorry, but there's two that will always stick in my craw, if you will, with Spielman, and that's going to be Ponder and Treadwell, because both of those, I even as someone that doesn't watch a ton of college football, I suppose I maybe watched more back then because, no kids and family, but it was just, I mean, I could tell you before we drafted him, like, this is not a
Spielman
good.
did not make the Ponder pick. Spielman did not make the Ponder pick.
Oh, I thought he did.
GM. He was
Oh,
the vice
really?
president. Ponder was 2011. His first pick was Matt Khalil, which is even worse.
yeah. I don't know.
At least Matt Khalil had a good season.
What did
He
that
had
go?
all good seasons.
Where did Khalil go? 4 or 6?
3. Khalil was third. We took him third. After Andrew Luck and RG3, we took Matt Khalil.
Well,
actually, we might have traded back to 4. We had the third pick. We might have moved back with Cleveland. I think Cleveland moved in front of us to get somebody.
We could have panicked and taken Kirk Cousins as the third quarterback off the board, or Russell Wilson.
It would have worked. It would have worked.
Oh my goodness, yeah. All right, well, I take it back. I take it back, Slick Rick. I won't lay Ponder at your feet, but you still got Treadwell. And
right.
yeah,
and Mike Hughes,
and all of them.
Yeah. I mean, at least Hughes still is like around. Like,
Well, yeah. Yeah, that's true. Mike Hughes is around. So maybe we should just blame Zimmer for not developing him. Yeah.
I mean, oh my God.
I mean, Waynes was solid, but yeah, he definitely wasn't worth where they got him,
Yeah, we spent a lot of high picks on people that were okay players, but
yeah.
Too bad we didn't have the vision. I was one of the people. Look, if I go back through my tweets, so anybody that wants to go picking through, I'm sure you can find it. I was on board with way back when with Cordero. It's like we didn't have the foresight to go, hey, so this guy doesn't really run the route tree, and his hands are okay, but he's a much more like body. This guy's just a dynamic guy with the ball in his hands. Maybe he needs to be more like a running back or like a gadget type player. And I get we had Adrian, but could you imagine where this team could have been had we have maybe like moved on from Adrian and got like a bunch of draft capital, trading him away before his knees fell apart? And actually, I mean, I'm not saying, I don't know. It's just what could have been. And of course, it took him going to Atlanta before they really made that transition. So, I suppose Belichick didn't do it either because obviously he had to stop in New England.
They pushed too hard to make him Percy Harvin right after Percy Harvin, kind of.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that guy. Different guy. Great player.
Different guy.
Yeah. All right, last re-signing that we'll talk about, Austin Schlottmann. We kind of hit on it already. But yeah, just another depth piece for the offensive line. Not a great depth piece, by the way, but again, a depth piece. And honestly, I think Chris Reed probably played center better, other than the one game. Played center better than what Schlottmann did when he played. But yeah, I mean, he's a backup center. I mean, that is what he is. And we have Garrett Bradbury back in front of him at least. But it'll be interesting to see the Vikings approach on offensive linemen past this year, because I really don't think they're going to spend much capital on that offensive line based on these moves with the re-signings of the guys that we've mentioned, Udoh and Schlottmann, and Chris Reed as well. Yeah. So Peter, go ahead.
I feel like they're just gonna bubble gum and duct tape it together this year and hope it works. O'Neal, I mean, Ezra Cleveland is, I don't know, he just kind of gets lost on the line. You never see him doing anything good, but never really doing anything bad. So I think they were projecting him a little bit higher than what he's been at. So hopefully he can get there. And then you're relying on your 2 tackles, and I think they're gonna totally overhaul the O-line around the 2 tackles and kind of just get an entire new interior when they get a chance.
Now, one thing I would say, I would love Cody Mock, by the way, from North Dakota State, because he is so versatile. And obviously the 2 missing teeth, or the missing teeth in the he basically, Peter, he kind of looks like you, except you have your teeth, you got the beard, you got the
He definitely pulls off being a Viking more than I
do. But no, like Cody Mock, the thing that's nice about him is he could play right tackle until O'Neal's 100%. And then if one of your other guards is not playing up to expectation, or maybe the Vikings just say, because I think Cleveland's contract's up after this year, right? Or is it after next year?
I'm not sure, but I mean,
so then you could put him into the left guard spot.
Yeah, he's more of a guard. He's just a little undersized. I know they kind of like tall guards. He's big. He's 6'5", but he's just like only 300 pounds, which is, you can't really play tackle at that size in the league at this point. I mean, you're pushing it. You're an undersized guy, but I know Cleveland's like 6'4", so we like tall guards, so that could be a good fit there for him. It's just, you never know with small college guys. They're kind of they're either like a surprisingly good player, or they're just horrible, and because they haven't faced, those kind of D linemen out there. They're very hit and miss.
Yeah, I think offensive line, I mean, I think that's maybe a little bit different compared to some of the, like, if you're a wide receiver and you're going against, FCS corners compared to FBS corners, because there are quite a few. Well, I don't know. I'm not gonna get into it. I'm gonna probably dig myself a hole. But Tony, any thoughts on Schlottmann?
I mean, just another guy, again, a known commodity, somebody that they've worked with before, that they've got some time with, they have their hands on. I hope he succeeds, because every time I hear his name, I just want to, like, PA to say Schlotsky's Deli, which is not going to mean about anything to the Midwesterners. But for Peter, I know you've got some in Texas. Being originally from North Carolina, we've got them in the Carolinas. None here in Minnesota and Iowa, but yeah, I just want him to say Schlotsky's Deli. He came to the deli, over at Austin Schlottmann, but I don't know. That's what I'm working with. You can tell how much I care about this re-signing by what I just said.
That's right. That's right. There you go. Well, gentlemen, before we get into our lovely sponsor, DraftKings, by the way, we'll talk about them momentarily. We're going to talk about some free agency grades. And I think you guys probably saw the D. Was it a D minus?
D plus.
D plus.
A strong D plus.
A D plus that the CBS Sports crew gave the Vikings for their moves so far. A much more generous grade from our friends at PFF. So here are the additions that the Vikings have made: Josh Oliver, Marcus Davenport, Byron Murphy Jr., and Dean Lowry so far, I should say. And the re-signings of Nick Mullins, Garrett Bradbury, Andrew DiPiola, Greg Joseph, and Alexander Madison. Plus, we mentioned the guys the other backup offensive linemen, which they don't care about. Then they also lost Dalvin Tomlinson, Eric Kendricks, Adam Thielen, Cameron Dantzler, and Patrick Peterson. So that's what the Vikings are dealing with in terms of gains and losses. And with all of that being said, PFF says A-. The Minnesota Vikings get an A- so far from what they've done in terms of the Vikings grade. Before we get into our grades, gentlemen, we're going to give our grades so far on the Vikings and what we think for a free agent grades so far. Can't give an offseason grade yet, obviously, but just free agents grade. I'm going to go ahead and say I think this is maybe more accurate. I think D plus is way too low, but I would say this maybe is even a little higher than I would put it. Um, but I do think PFF's probably closer than what CBS Sports is. Because here's the thing, I'm not blown away by any of these signings. I think Byron Murphy could be a really good player, but I wouldn't say he's probably a top 10 corner or even top 15 corner in the league. So that's where I would say A minus is probably a little bit too much, and everybody else pretty much is depth, really. I mean, Marcus Davenport could potentially start depending on if Za'Darius leaves. All that drama yet has to unfold. It sounds like he's going to be here unless he gets traded. But yeah, free agent grade. What are your thoughts on the grades that have been given by those two sources? Peter, let's start with you on this.
I would probably split the difference, honestly. D plus is a little harsh, but A minus is way too high. Byron Murphy's the best signing. I think we can all agree with that, especially for a team need standpoint. And the contract is pretty team friendly. The more I looked into the Davenport stuff, that's a really bad contract. It's 1 year, but we way overpaid for him what the market value was. Oliver is way out of left field, which I think was a bad, just way too expensive again for a backup tight end. Now maybe they turn him into a freak at 6'7" and he can catch the ball like all of a sudden, but again, very expensive. I have this problem with Kwesi where he kind of like very much gives off that Wall Street kind of vibe, like slick guy. I'm gonna make the best deal. I'm gonna outsmart the room. And sometimes football is like really simple, and sometimes the best player is just the best player, and their number speaks for itself. So I don't love all the moves. I like some. It's a very mixed bag so far. I'd probably give it a B to B minus. It's not like we had much cap anyway. But I felt like we way overpaid for some depth positions that we didn't really need to overpay for. But we got a good steal in Murphy. I'm okay with the Madison deal. I thought that was very affordable for Madison to come back in, especially if he's going to be more focused in the offense. Who knows what Dalvin Cook's going to do? So seems like he's been getting, like, towards the beginning of free agency, he was overpaying with those numbers, and towards the back end, we've been seeing much better contracts that we need to have. So I'd give it a B minus. We'll see. You can't really grade it until we play it on the field and see how these guys turn out. Because we thought we had a really good draft last year, and we would give last year's draft class an F. Like, honestly speaking, we were thinking, like, this is a good draft class, and what they did for us on the field in 2022, it would be an F. So we got to wait and see.
Tony.
Yeah, I agree with you, Peter. I don't have as too much to really add to that. I think a B to B minus grade is exactly where I'm sitting as well. I think you also have to take into consideration like what I am taking into consideration when giving a grade. I would say with the resources we had, that's where I would land on a B to B minus. If we had more resources and these were the moves we were making, it would probably be a worse grade. So it's with that little asterisk. One thing that I've, just to add on a little bit of context to what Peter said, this is something that I've been mulling over since the Josh Oliver trade, because I'm with you. I know we talked about it a little bit last week, Peter, or earlier this week, I should say. That was a little bit of a head scratcher for me. I mean, I've come to terms with it, but one thing that just kind of dawned on me the other day, I would guarantee what we're going to see this next year, unless there's something weird happens, and certainly things can change, but I think that their vision for how they wanted to run this offense with having like two competent tight ends is basically what they're going to try to do this next year in 23 with Oliver and Hawk. I think they hoped to maybe get Irv Smith Jr. back and then have that look, or the looks that they wanted to have with those two towards the end of the year. And then as we found out, like, something was just up with Irv. I mean, with the injuries, the
got
confidence
Butterfingers over here.
issues. Yep, confidence issues, and then it snowballed, right? Because he got the dropsies, and so I think that is how they're going to attack this. If everybody stays healthy, is I would hedge to bet we're going to see what they wanted to do last year with those two towards the end of the year, but with Oliver and Hawk. So it's going to be interesting to see. I'm excited to see it, and at the end of the day, you got to give them kudos for saying, "Hey, we really think this is a good game plan," and testing it out. Put it to the test.
Well, I think this Josh Oliver move, and to combine that with bringing back Ben Ellefson, which they did as well, I think that for sure signals the end of Irv Smith, and I'm sure that's to many people's chagrin, based on all the drops.
He's gone.
Yeah, I wouldn't have minded giving him another year, hopefully fully healthy, just to see what he could do on, like maybe a 1 year, $5 million prove it deal type of a thing. But I like this move better because I think Josh Oliver is hands down a better blocking tight end, and I think Josh Oliver has not really fully been able to showcase what he can do with his hands. I think he's a better receiving tight end than what people are giving him credit for as well. And I think that's what the Vikings are banking on, to what Peter kind of had mentioned earlier. But he's definitely a better receiving tight end, and that doesn't take much, obviously, than Johnny Munt. So he's got that going for him. But Ben Ellefson, I think, is obviously pretty much just a strictly blocking tight end. I mean, maybe now and then we'll get a tight end screen. Please don't. But I would prefer no tight end screens ever, but especially not to Ben Ellefson. But no, I think Josh Oliver's contract, I know you're kind of not too happy on it, Peter, but I will say I think it's okay. I'm not too upset about it. Davenport's just a 1 year flyer. I mean, I think they probably had to overpay him a little bit for him to take a 1 year deal. And I think that's what the Vikings want, right? They want flexibility in 2024. And even with Oliver, they could get out of it, which I don't see happening unless he just has an awful year or he has like a fantastic year. Because I don't think the Vikings want to basically pay him $5 million dead cap hit, which is what this contract would give them. 8.2 is what he would make next year. If they cut him, then they'd give 4.7 on the cap for next year. Then in 2025, if things haven't worked out by then, they could save $8 million to the cap by cutting him before his age 28 season. So, yeah, I don't hate either contract. I think, like I said, especially with Davenport, to get him on that 1 year deal, you had to overpay. And I think Josh Oliver, if you wanted that guy to be in the building, which I think they did, they were willing to give him that kind of a contract. And honestly, I'm not too against it. I would rather have a guy like Josh Oliver as my tight end too than Johnny Munt. I mean, Johnny Munt, yeah, he would have probably had that, 1 year minimum type of deal, but I would feel much more comfortable having Josh Oliver attempt to fill TJ Hawkinson's role in the offense if he was gone for a game or missed a couple of games here and there than a Johnny Munt or a Ben Ellefson, which Ben Ellefson, I think, and not even guaranteed to make the roster, I don't think, unless I look at his contract and saw otherwise. But I would say this is why the Vikings did that. They don't want to be in a situation again next year where they have to trade for another type of TJ Hawkinson if TJ Hawkinson gets hurt. And not saying that Josh Oliver's nearly as good as TJ Hawkinson, but he's much more formidable than what the Vikings had on the roster a year ago. That's kind of how I feel about it. And with all that being said, gentlemen, I'm giving the Vikings a B as well. I think that's probably a really good spot. Maybe a B minus. You could go even down to. But yeah, definitely Byron Murphy Jr. the best signing of all of these. And again, I'm not too high on Byron Murphy. I think he's good, a good player, and I think he could get even better with Justin Jefferson going against him in practice, as he said. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with him over the next couple of years. It sounds like, I believe Murphy's contract's kind of that same way, where it can be an opt out after the season in 23. So it's, again, the flexibility for next year is enormous for the Vikings, which I guess is good, because I think really they are going to be 2024 is going to be the year where they really start to build the roster the way they had envisioned it. I think we're seeing a little bit of that the last couple of years, but it's been so much of the old regime that I think now we're starting to see a little bit more. And then in 2024, we're going to probably get almost a full slate of looking at, this is what Kwesi and KOC had envisioned for this team when they came in. So yeah, I'm with you guys on that the B grade for what the Vikings have done in free agency so far. And I think Tony hit the nail on the head too with, yeah, this is a B grade considering they had very little to work with in terms of cap. So that's where I would agree with the B, and that's probably why I don't go down to a B minus. I think you could really start to look to go down further, have the Vikings had, the cap space of Jacksonville or the cap space of the Bears.
I would fire our GM if this was the moves, if we had the cap space of the Bears. That's a fireable offense if we had $95 million and we're picking up these.
Yeah. You could have Tremaine Edmonds, but how about Marcus Davenport?
How about Udoh?
Right.
How about Udoh?
We're bringing Udoh back. Yes. Yeah. No, you're right.
Who wants a steak dinner when you can have a McChicken?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. For the same price, what would you rather have?
Yeah, exactly.
McNuggets, definitely.
Yeah, that's sweet and sour, baby.
All right, gentlemen. Well, before we get into a mock draft, because we love mock drafts, and I'm gonna pretend like I know what I'm doing a little bit better this time. So there's that. Before we get into that, though, we need to tell you all about DraftKings, our sponsors through the Pigskin Podcast Network. Being a part of the Pigskin Podcast Network, the action never ends at DraftKings Sportsbook, especially this summer with tons of ways to bet on all your favorite sports. You can fuel your fandom and feel the heat of the season like never before. Plus, right now, DraftKings Sportsbook is giving new customers a risk-free bet up to $1,000. That's right. Make your first bet up to $1,000, and if it doesn't win, you'll get another shot to cash in. So there you go. There you go, Peter. Another shot to cash in if you don't win right away. So you can throw down on all the major action for baseball, golf, MMA, and more. Plus, same game parlays, spreads, money lines, over-unders, and props. Your betting options feel endless. Best of all, DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. You can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code TPPN. Scrolling across the bottom of the screen for our viewers on YouTube. Again, that's promo code TPPN. Make your first deposit and get risk-free bets up to $1,000. That's promo code TPPN only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details. So there you have it, gentlemen. DraftKings, and I'm sure Tony is going to be loving up on this daily fantasy Tony, have you been doing any daily fantasy recently? Anything for March Madness, which is still going on? You're muted, sir.
See, look at that. I'm so excited. I had to turn my mic off because I was just so excited. I didn't want to pick it up. Nothing really for March Madness, but I am a pretty heavy player with NBA basketball. So definitely